Hey guys, welcome back to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. The channel where we talk all about distillation, be it home distilling and or professional distilling, and I try to answer your questions to the best of my possibilities and understanding. So, as always, reach out to us at bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, the YouTube comments below, or any of my social media, and I'll try to get back to you with the best possible answer I can for the question you ask. So, Robert Fontaine had asked in a YouTube comment, and I do not have that printed out in front of me, but I roughly know what he was driving at here, about talking about neutral spirits and vodka in particular, that he sees people talking about going up to 20% ABV and using carbon and getting good results. And his question is whether or not professional distillers try to maximize the yield from a fermentation for things like neutral spirit in order to get more proof gallons, right? Off the fermentation, going through the still, etc. So I have a few thoughts on this and I'll comment on it. And my opinion is probably going to be different than a lot of other commercial distillers. So we don't make a ton of neutral spirit at the distillery that I work at. As you guys know from watching the channel, even with home distilling, I'm not big on, going to 190, 192, whatever, for completely neutral spirits. I do like lighter spirits at 160, 170, 180, right? But I don't ever go for completely neutral. In the commercial distilleries, and we touched on this in a previous video about ABV and our washes, mashes, wines, etc. Most commercial distillers, not all, especially if they're dealing with all grain or they're dealing with wine, and even if they are making neutral, specifically if they're making a neutral to let's say fortify a brandy or fortify a wine, right? So you're going to use a grape neutral to fortify a wine. It's pretty common to still use, a 7 to 10% ABV and not push that ferment real hard to try to get that neutral alcohol. And even though you're going up to 192.3, you're getting some of that grape softness and sweetness coming across, and you're not getting that kind of angular, as Jesse from Still calls it, sugar bowl effect, right? From that higher ABV, that rougher, harsher alcohol, even at that high proof, and even going to neutrality, you can still get some edginess there and some spikiness there that you wouldn't necessarily want if you were fortifying a wine. Even with vodka, for example, at my distillery, if we are distilling corn, we're only going to go to maybe 10 or 11% ABV at the most. Again, to try to avoid that jaggy, very hot, very harsh alcohol, even though, again, we're going up to neutral. Now, if we were to push that ferment and get to 10, 15, 20%, right, which you could do, would you get more proof gallons? Yes. Would you be more efficient? Yes. Would you also make hotter, more aggressive alcohol, which may or may not lend itself to vodka, because even in that neutral spirit vodka that is corn-based that we make, we still want that corn sweetness and that softness and that roundness to come across in the distillation and be there in the glass of vodka that you have. Could you use carbon to filter that and clean it up quite a bit? Yes. And this kind of goes back into some of the filtering questions we've had on the channel before. And as you guys know, I'm not the biggest fan of heavy filtration in the world. I tend to have a much more practical distiller approach where I go, all right, I don't want to have to filter anything any more than I need to after distillation, after maturation, etc. So let's tackle this from the get-go with fermentation. Let's leave our ABV at something reasonable, between 7 and 10%, right? Even if we're going to use sugar and we're going to make a sugar shine for a neutral, I'm always going to invert that sugar, because I do not want that candy or that sugar bowl effect off that alcohol when it's done, where you open it up and it smells like a sugar bowl, right? There's some instances where I may want that, but definitely not in a neutral. So I'm going to go low alcohol. I'm going to invert sugar if I use sugar, etc. And then when I tackle distillation, I'm going to be looking for the parameters that I want in order to have a clean ethanol that also has a nice little bit of flavor to it, without needing a lot of heavy filtration, right? So if I feel like, from my perspective, if I'm a good distiller, the fermentation, the stripping run, and then the doubling run, the finishing run to get up to the high proof ethanol, I'm going to tackle those with the goal in mind that what comes off that still should be as close as possible off of the still via the fermentation, distillation, etc., to what I want to be able to taste in the bottle, so that I can avoid as much filtration or as much changing of my initial art form as what is possible, if that makes any sense. So for me, no, we don't push fermentations hard to get high ABV, even for neutral spirit, whether it be in a professional environment or a home environment, because again, for me, it's a quality versus quantity thing. Now, I do know that there are guys out there that will push, a 1090 or higher even. I've seen some really high sugar shine numbers out there, right, with when they're making neutral. And that's fine. You can do that. They don't even invert the sugar a lot of times. If you invert the sugar, it's going to soften it up a little bit. It's not going to be as edgy, as jaggy, as candy bowl or as sugar bowl, right? But even inverted 1090 is pretty high. Now, most of those guys are probably going to take that neutral spirit, and they're probably going to cut it in half or better with their different flavors, especially if they're doing sugar shines and they want, watermelon or apple or Jolly Rancher or whatever the fuck people do at home. And that's fine. You can cover that up and you can make a good product that tastes good, but it's definitely going to have that aroma. That initial alcohol is going to have some jagginess to it. I don't make flavored alcohols like that at my current distillery. And I don't make flavored alcohols like that a whole lot at home. And when I do, it tends to be things like, a coffee liqueur or a botanical liqueur or a fruit liqueur or cordial, things of that nature, right? So I want that softer, rounder, sweeter alcohol without that edge on it and without having to push that ABV. And I want to approach it again from the standpoint of, let's get everything right from fermentation and ingredients up through distillation so that way we don't have to manipulate it any more than necessary. I may look at it differently, obviously, if I was working at a large ethanol plant. I suspect that if you were to go to one of the large producers like MGP, and I don't know this is a fact, but they probably do try to go to a higher ABV for efficiency reasons and energy savings, cost savings, labor savings, etc. And I'm sure they have a huge investment in filtration, right? And on scale at that size, yeah, that probably makes 100%, sense to do that. But for me, and I think probably for most small craft distillers and most home distillers, being a little bit more practical about our fermentations and distillations and the quality of the alcohols that we're making, I suspect that a lot of other people watching the channel feel that way. If not, though, and you guys have thoughts, then please feel free. Again, I'm not a filtration expert, and filtration comments keep coming up on the YouTube channel. Fill me in. Comment on the comments below and let me know, and I'll gladly publish some of those as we go so we can let other people know other approaches to this for sure. I was just talking to a very good friend of mine down in Florida who's a distillery owner, and we were talking about sugar shines, and a lot of guys that come into these distilleries and they do 1 pound per gallon, which is what I always did when I was home distilling, right? Well, it is low ABV, and his reaction to that is, you're going to have low ABV. Is it really worth the time and energy to run that off? And my reaction to it is, it depends, qualitative or quantitative, right? Just a matter of how you look at it and what your rationale is or can be. So, as always, check out thealchemistcabinet.com for links to everything else I do, including Distillers Talk with Christy Atkinson, our other podcast, as well as our paranormal podcast, If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. Please like and share and keep the questions coming, guys. Love y'all. Later.